Charles Dickens, a figure synonymous with Victorian England and recognized as one of the first authors to become an international celebrity. His timeless works such as A Tale of Two Cities, Great Expectations, Oliver Twist, A Christmas Carol, and many others continue to resonate with audiences, and yet for several years, Dickens looked as if his writing career was doomed for mediocrity or failure. Join me now for a look at Boz and Charles Dickens, A Tale of Two Writers. While the first European novel is often credited as Cervantes' Don Quixote, others such as Ian Watts pointed to the 18th century as when the novel became an established art form. Daniel just argues, Watts' inquiry is not a set of stylistic traits, but a search for the moment when a specific type of storytelling gained a pivotal social role. For Watts, this moment was the early 18th century. The new literary form created by the English writers of that period strikes one as radically innovative, both because of its literary qualities and because of its social function. Since the new genre was capable of recording the significant socio-cultural changes of the time, the novel, according to Watts, emerged. It could be a difficult time to be an author, as writers often relied on the support of patrons in order to survive, and even then, wealth was rarely achieved. Furthermore, novels were often written for the wealthy elite who patronized the authors. There were exceptions, but this would not change for some time. Even as writers such as Sir Walter Scott became famous, fame could be fleeting. A financial crisis bankrupted Scott. Dickens knew this and knew how tenuous a writing career could be. In the first 2 decades of the 19th century, writers were less concerned with literary celebrity. Apparently, no established set of mechanism for generating and purveying the writer as person-performer existed. Instead, the relationship between the writer and his public followed the more traditional pattern of the community of taste and interest between an educated, aristocratic public and the writers it patronized and supported. As John G. Cawelti explains, the nature of the writer was changing. Later in the 19th century, many changes in the artistic situation conspired to make the writer's celebrity an increasingly important issue. Increasing literacy, the fact that through new printing technologies, books and periodicals became cheaper than ever, and the ideological emphasis of a democratic culture greatly expanded the size and diversity of the writer's public. Charles Dickens would play a pivotal role in the development of the industrial age author. Charles Dickens began writing during a time of great change in the publishing industry and benefited from being in the right place at the right time. As Robert L. Patten notes, Dickens was still poor, poorly educated, ambitious, and on the lookout for opportunities. He had arrived in London at just the right moment when the energy, talent, money, and connections that had forged such an extraordinary intellectual and print culture in Scotland during the 18th century were migrating rapidly southward to the north bank of the Thames. However, that should not be seen as taking away from his incredible talent and vision as a writer. Charles Dickens began writing as a journalist, but envisioned bigger things. He knew jumping from journalist to writer was not unheard of. Dickens knew of other journalists who became successful authors. While working as a journalist, Charles Dickens first achieved success writing fiction under the pen name of Boz, which he took from his younger brother's nickname. Like many writers, Dickens saw a pen name as a chance to test his writing without drawing attention to himself during his day job. Dickens' work as Boz caught attention for his sketches about life in England. These works were collected in the book Sketches by Boz, a venture which led to some success for Boz. This led to him writing in serial format, beginning with his first novel, The Pickwick Papers. The Pickwick Papers was an ambitious and risky move. The serialized novel became a success, but no one could have predicted it initially. It barely sold a few hundred copies monthly, and if it had stopped then, this Boz effort, like most of his plays and all of his poems, would simply have disappeared into the furthest margins of his curriculum vitae. Dickens and his publishers altered the serial's format, reducing its illustrations from 4 to 2 and increasing the number of written pages. This may seem like a minor alteration, but it gave Dickens more space to tell his story and to put less stress on him to come up with a plot point that would make for compelling illustrations only 2 times rather than 4. This and other factors, such as the introduction of the wildly popular character Sam Weller in the serial's 10th chapter, led to the serial's success. In hindsight, the posthumous papers of the Pickwick Club, as it was originally called, was almost an accidental success, as it was originally designed to showcase the illustrations of its artist Robert Seymour, with Dickens providing the text to flesh out these illustrations, capitalizing on his previous success as Boz. Boz's success grew, and it was becoming clear that writing could be successful for Dickens. However, like many of the novels he would eventually write, Dickens' personal journey to success was full of twists and turns. Success was becoming likely, but there were still many obstacles. Dickens faced debts and obligations that challenged him and his writing. For example, in his quest to capitalize on his growing fame, he took on many writing assignments. He edited a literary magazine and produced material for said magazine, as well as the serialized fiction. Over time, it became clear he was encumbered with too much. At the same time, Dickens started a family and wanted to ensure that they did not experience the financial struggles he'd seen as a child. Dickens' father pressured him for money, further complicating his finances. Dickens often scrambled to get his work done in time, and on more than one occasion, he could not meet deadlines. Consider these Dickens works. Bentley's Miscellany. Dickens edited this magazine and contributed to it, including the serial Oliver Twist, eventually collected as a novel, until a business dispute ended his work there. Nicholas Nickleby, a monthly serial, eventually collected as a novel. Master Humphrey's Clock, 1840 to 1841, a weekly periodical edited and written by Dickens, which included the serialized stories The Old Curiosity Shop and Barnaby Rudge, both which were collected as individual novels in 1841, and the Old Curiosity Shop novel marked the beginning of Dickens using his patronym rather than his pseudonym of Boz. After writing under his pen name of Boz, Charles Dickens opted to use his real name. However, this presented a challenge. While Dickens had acknowledged that he wrote as Boz, the public is more familiar with Boz at the time than Charles Dickens. Publishers would understandably be concerned sales might suffer were books to be published under the Dickens name. However, Dickens was adamant about writing under his true name because he had more in mind than income. Dickens was seeking social status. In a society based on a well-defined social structure, Dickens wanted to be more than a writer. He wanted to become a gentleman in Victorian England. Eventually, Dickens won, proving a pest for his publishers, but a profitable pest at that. As Alexander Dumas famously said, "Nothing succeeds like success," and Dickens' career showed how his ever-growing sales gave him more power as an author. Dickens was able to repeatedly renegotiate the terms of his contracts, and over time, showed that a determined writer with a strong commercial following and resolute advisors could negotiate favorable contracts. Dickens got paid, participated in determining in what formats, at what price, and when his writings would be released, obtained a share of the copyright after a limited period of time, and had a right to inspect the publisher's books to ascertain that he was paid fairly on the profits and in a timely manner. Despite his success, Dickens faced the problem all authors faced, dealing with a weak domestic copyright law and no reciprocal copyright laws overseas. As a result, foreign publishers typically printed and sold Dickens' books with no remuneration to him. This changed over time, including England's Copyright Act of 1842, which provided that in the future, the copyright of every book published in the lifetime of its author would endure for the remainder of the author's life and for a further 7 years after their death. If this period was less than 42 years from the first publication, then the copyright would persist for a full 42 years, regardless of the date of their death. Any work published after the author's death would remain the copyright of the owner of the manuscript for the same 42-year period. The artist formerly known as Boz showed incredible insight into what his audience wanted and how to market his work to them. Dickens wrote during a time when works of fiction faced tremendous competition. Religious publications were the most popular titles during the 1940s, followed by geography, history, travel, and biography. Fiction ranked third, but Dickens recognized the power of demographics, marketing his works at different prices to appeal to different economic classes. Dickens loved his audience, and as Robert L. Patten argues, Dickens' greatest goal was reaching his readers. His need for a clamorous reception from his audience, that, more than money, family, or mistress, was his greatest love affair. Dickens was able to establish himself as a peerless novelist. The change from Boz to Dickens was slow and full of challenges. However, Dickens persevered. In the process, Dickens capitalized on the changing market forces. The wider circulation of books and periodicals led to the emergence of new attitudes on the part of publishers that made catering to broader public taste and interest an economic imperative. Dickens not only revolutionized literature, he revolutionized the literary market.